We are April and Scott, creators of NaughtyGym.com, and this is the Naughty Gym Show.
For years, we've been fitness and nutrition coaches to thousands of people through our commercial gyms and online platform. We've also spent nearly a decade in an ever-evolving open relationship.
This show brings together two of our biggest passions, fitness and sex positivity. Our mission is to maximize the physical and mental health of anyone brave enough to explore relationship structures that run counter to societal norms.
We have demolished our old ways of thinking about relationships, and from that rubble, built a life full of happiness, adventure, and vitality. And now we want to help you do the same.
So hop on the treadmill, start the show, and let us teach you how to never stop playing. Welcome back to the Naughty Gym Show. I'm your host, April, and this is my co-host and love of my life, Scott.
Oh, that's the first sweet intro you've done.
That's what you said last time.
No, you said like my best patient or something.
No, maybe it was 2 times. Like, I'm very sweet.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, today's podcast episode is another one of our keynotes from Be Better at Being Bad at Hedo back at the 1st of January. This is my keynote address on the final day of the event. And this is a very controversial, I think, idea. There's probably going to be, if you listen all the way through to the end, you're going to have questions or disagreements, pushbacks, and you're going to get to hear some of the live questions and Q&A from the audience. We did this at the piano bar in Hedo, and some of the audience had questions.
I think it's a little less controversial than you may think that it is. I think it was pretty well embraced. Lots of questions, but I think it was well embraced by the majority of people that listened at Hedo.
Yeah, it was. I hope that that's the case. I hope it's going to be a broadly accepted idea, but it could be that those were just a lot of people who have listened to our podcast and maybe think some of the same ways we do. I don't know. But so we ask that you kind of listen through this, listen to the end, listen to the questions at the end, and we'd love to hear your feedback. If you think this is crazy or you think it's wonderful or you have questions, message us, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. The audio is like with April's keynote from a couple weeks ago. It's good, not great. It's done over a live microphone in the piano bar, so the audio's decent. We've cleaned it up enough that you should be able to understand everything that's being said. And we are going to have a discussion after we play the live version of the speech. April and I will talk about some of the things in a little bit more detail. So
enjoy.
Hope you enjoy.
I am typically really comfortable standing up in front of groups talking. I like doing it. I used to hate it as a kid. I was terrified of it, and I've learned to enjoy it. It sort of energizes me, but I am scared to death today, not because I'm all that nervous about standing in front of a group of people, but what I'm going to talk about today literally scares me. It scares me, for one, that I may be wrong. All right, so I will freely admit that everything I say today may be complete horseshit. All right, and that scares me because I don't like being wrong, and most of us don't, especially about deeply cherished beliefs that we have, right? So it was a difficult process for most of you, I would assume, if you've been challenging the belief that you should be monogamous with the person that you're married to, right? And it's not easy. It's a difficult thing to change the way we think about something. But yet we've done it to some degree. And you probably, if you're still here, think you're better off for it, right? This also scares me because I think I might be right. I actually believe I'm right. But if I'm right, it puts us, and I have been on this journey just personally for quite some time thinking through this stuff, it puts me on a scary journey. And I have to console myself with the idea that I've gone through a scary journey once and come out the other side even happier, and then maybe I can do it again. So I may be wrong, I may be right, and I have a feeling that you're all going to have some pushback to the things I'm going to say today, and that's fine, because I did too. And this has taken me a long time to distill what I've worried myself over for months and months down to a theory that is 7 words. So I scrapped the entire thing 2 days ago. I realized there was something, I had finished it for a while, but I realized there was something about it that's bugging me. I couldn't figure out what it was. And I don't know, there's been some conversations that I've had and speeches that I've heard here that made me realize that what I had built in this speech originally was constructed more like a an attorney trying to win a court case. It was an argument. It was step by step, here's why I'm right, and I was trying to convince you of that. And that's not really how we typically change our mind about things that we believe in deeply. You don't get reason out of monogamy. You sort of love your way, connect your way, relate your way out of monogamy. And so I didn't want to present this as some sort of argument to convince you that I'm right. I just wanted to construct it in a way that was a conversation and maybe encourage you to have a conversation when you left today. All right, so it's not as polished as I thought it was. So it's going to be a little rambling. It's going to be more like a conversation, and that's fine. If I get off track or go down rabbit holes, that's going to be okay. But here's what I've come up with. This is wild love theory. It's impose relational limits, prevent maximal relational happiness. All right, impose relational limits, prevent maximal relational happiness. So before we start, I'm going to cover a few things first. Impose limits, by that I mean something that you have imposed on your partner that they probably otherwise wouldn't choose to accept or do or want as part of their life. Right? It's imposed. It's probably set with good intentions. You're doing it for safety and protection of your relationship and this thing that you value probably more than anything else in the world. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's a limit. It's imposed, and it's not something that they necessarily would want otherwise. But before we go into it, I want to say what I'm not saying, right? Because I've talked this through with several people that I respect, and some common themes come up as people are listening to it. What I'm not saying is that you can't be happy with relationally imposed limits. April and I still have limits in our relationship, boundaries, use whatever word you want. And we're wildly happy. All right, so I'm not saying you can't be happy. We're talking about maximal happiness. Going in, no worry that you're late.
But she made the best of it.
All right, so I'm not saying you can't be happy, all right? So if you start feeling that, just remember that's not the point of this. Wild love theory also doesn't suggest that you leave here today, wipe out all the limits and boundaries and agreements that you have with your partner, and just say go crazy and hope for the best. Because that's the worst possible thing you could do. That's a recipe for disaster. And if you are familiar with relationship anarchy, this isn't that. Right? If you don't know what that is, I'm not going to give a speech about relationship anarchy, but it's essentially you don't have that many rules or any in your relationship. You're allowed to love and relate and connect and live with and whatever you want. But relationship anarchy is different than what I'm talking about today because it is very anti-hierarchy. Most people who are relationship anarchists believe that it's an unethical thing to say that I love this person and I love this person, but to treat one as more important or to treat one as your primary. Wild love theory is something you can apply not only to any relationship structure, but any type of structure, even friendships and family and that sort of thing. All right, so this is a little bit different, but there are some similarities. One of the things that wild love theory stresses is this intense belief in personal autonomy. All right, we are happiest when we get to be our truest self. When we're allowed to do the things we want to do, connect the way we want to connect, relate to people the way we want to relate, and to be exactly who we are without fear of repercussions or emotional consequences. It's one of the reasons we love being here. You don't have to hide, or probably don't have to hide much for yourself. Maybe there are still some things, but they say welcome home when we get here, because it does. It feels like a weight is lifted off your shoulder when you walk in, because you can be who you are. Relationship or authenticity is so critical to our happiness, yet when we get into relationships, in order to protect it, we start imposing limits on that authenticity. And essentially, what we say when we do that to our partner is be yourself, but only in ways that make me feel comfortable. So it's not true autonomy, right? And this creates a tension. It's a constant push-pull between autonomy and appeasement. And it's difficult. It's brutally difficult because you want to be happy with your partner. You want them to trust you and believe in you and know that you're not going to do anything to hurt them. And so these rules are set with great intentions. But they do limit our happiness. And over time, that tension will start to erode away at the foundation of your happiness. The longer you have to be something a little bit different than who you really are, the less happy you're going to be. And again, I'm not saying you can't be happy. I'm just saying you could be a little happier. So why do we impose these limits? We all do it, probably. I doubt anybody in here can truly say they have no limits in their relationship, no boundaries, nothing that they've said, look, we can do this, but you are not allowed to do this, this, and this. Right? Why do we have these limits? And it's usually based off one of two things. And I lost my place already. My computer switched to the internet. It's usually a fear of, it's either fear or insecurity. It's a fear of being replaced, hurt, abandoned, left behind, or some insecurity that you're going to lose what you have to somebody else, or some other type of insecurity. But we impose these limits with those good intentions of trying to protect this thing that matters most to us. But it causes a problem. We set a boundary that's either imposed explicitly or implicitly on our partner, and that boundary pressures our partner to adjust their behavior to avoid conflict or emotional consequences. And then they start to suppress a part of themselves to appease that problem, that insecurity that you have with them. And over time, that can breed discontent, less happiness, a wish to be something other than what you currently are. And so it scares us. Just the idea, if right now you're thinking, is this guy really dumb enough to say that we should just tell our partner, go be free and do whatever you want? It's a scary fucking thought. And I know because I've put myself through that process for quite some time. And I'm not talking about non-monogamy, I'm talking about something that I have worked on internally, really without talking to my wife about it for a long time. And it's scary. But if we loosen our grip on our partner, if we're in a relationship that is truly foundationally stable and solid, our partners start to feel more trusted and accepted. Right? Imagine the feeling that your partner were to tell you, look, I trust you. Go be who you are and do it in whatever way you want, and I'm going to be here no matter what. It feels like something great to receive, but terrifying to give away, right? But your partner will gain the space to form meaningful connections with other people, true, meaningful connections in the way that they want it. And I'm not talking about just hugs and petty little I love yous. I'm talking about real shit. I'm talking about you falling in love as deeply as you can with anybody and everybody you want to. I'm not saying you're fucking everybody in sight. I'm just saying that you don't go into a conversation with a new person with all of these boundaries in your head of things you can't do when you're having that conversation with them. Sometimes we get a little taste of that here, and it feels amazing. I don't know how many of you I've kissed this week, but it's been quite a few, and I love it. And I'm not chasing... What?
Well...
Sorry. Hey, the week's not over. But when we could give that, if we could give that kind of freedom away to our our hey, can you edit that out? We can give that away to our partner. What a gift, right? Our last podcast episode, I told April, she didn't know what was coming. I told April on there that I'm giving her that gift of this freedom. There's no more rules on my side for her. And it's terrifying, but it's not because of the strength of my mind or convictions. It's because of the way she's treated me for the last 10 years. We have been non-monogamous since the beginning of our relationship. And I can truly say that over 10 years, she's never once violated my trust. I violated hers once. It's hard, it's hard to know exactly what you can and can't do in every one of these situations. And I know at the bottom of my heart that she's never going to try and intentionally hurt me. So why not just give her the freedom to be who she wants to be in whatever way she wants to be it? I'm going to do something that I think is very cliche, and if I were in your seats, I would hate it and roll my eyes, but I'm going to read a poem. And I'm not a poem guy, mostly because I don't understand them usually. But
This one,
yeah, this one's written in dumb people language, so you should all be fine, like me. It's written by a guy named Atticus. This guy's a poet that, I don't know if anybody's heard, he became somewhat famous on social media. And anytime he appears publicly, he wears a mask because he doesn't want the focus to be on who he is. He just wants it to be on the poetry, the words, right? And I'm also not a good poetry reader, so this is not going to sound poetic when I read it. But just listen to the meaning here, and then we're going to close this out and go finish the rest of the week. It's called Love Her Wild. And by the way, I just stumbled on this a few months ago, and it just fits perfectly with what we're talking about, with this wild love theory. It starts with, what of the firefly, the one I love to chase? The old man smiled. Love her, he said, but leave her wild. And the old oak tree I love to climb. Love her, he said, but leave her wild. The birds that sing that song I love her, he said, but leave her wild. And the wolf that cries to the old Joe moon, love her, he said, but leave her wild. And the horse that loves to run with storms, love her, he said, but leave her wild. And what of her, the one I love most? And the old man smiled. Yes, he said, you must love her too, but love her wild, and she'll love you. So I'm such a pussy. Is this possible? Is it realistic to think that you can do this? There's no chance I could ever love anybody the way I love April. We've been through the wars together. Over the last 10 years, we've been outed. We've had the foundation of our life ripped out from under us. We've had to rebuild from scratch. We've almost gone bankrupt. And here we are flourishing. And I truly believe that nothing can tear us apart anymore. But there's no way I could ever love anybody that way. But I can try. I'm committed to her and I'm going to spend my life with her. Nobody's ever going to be able to put the time and energy into a relationship with me the way she can and does. So I can never love anybody to the depth that I love her, but I can try, and that's what matters. It's the effort. It may bother you, but if I have shared a 5-minute conversation with you this week, any conversation, I've been trying to love you. If I've shared a kiss, if I've been given that privilege this week, I've tried to love you in that kiss. I don't know that that's reasonable. I don't know that you can fall madly in love with somebody in a 5-minute conversation or a short kiss, but I was trying, and I'm not ashamed of it anymore. It's the effort that matters. The only thing I think that we should consider is to just start the conversation of what would it look like if we tried to love everybody as deeply as we can. The conversation will take you on a difficult journey. You're going to ask hard questions. It's not going to be easy, but monogamy to non-monogamy was that way as well. So I think it's worth having that conversation if you find any value in what we talk about today. It's going to take time. This was something that I felt deeply about for a long time, but couldn't put into words. And I've struggled with it internally on my own for the most part for a long time. So I'm not saying this is something that you can go and start working on and put into practice tomorrow. In the original version of this, I had written some starting points, some steps that I was going to suggest that might be a way forward for you to start trying some of this. But that's not who I am. I'm not that guy. We've got professionals for that. I'm just trying to get you to start a conversation and to think through some of these things. Our world is full of hate and anger and bitterness and sadness and wars and terrorism and ideologies that oppose each other in such a way that it takes otherwise good people and makes them sometimes do monstrous things. The world needs to heal. And I think this is a way it could happen. Wild love theory audaciously claims to be a solution to all of those problems. I can't think of a single problem that we have in this world that wouldn't be solved by love. In choosing to love wildly and without limits, you start down a path that can ease the pains of the world, because I can promise you it is diabolically difficult to hug and hate somebody at the same time. I think that this process of trying to love everybody in our life, everybody that we meet, and to try to deeply connect to them in every possible way, and yes, I mean that sexually, if that's what it turns in for you. I think if we start that journey, every one of these problems in the world will go away. I don't know how we can continue to hate each other if we're all in love. This was short, and I'm so thankful that all of you have given April and I a week of your time. I hope you'll come back next year. We love you all dearly, and we're going to continue to try to fall more and more in love with you. Thank you. All right, you can go. Go Mark.
More.
Are you going to take questions?
Yeah, sure.
I have so many questions.
God damn it, okay.
Well, the first one is, you're talking about, like, you're burning up with freedom and unconditional love, right? And you guys have created the preconditions for that because the universe has brought you together, and you've had years together of doing what you say you're going to do. So you're talking about no rules, no boundaries, let them go, but the preconditions of that surely are agreements and rules. And so is this a theory that you're saying scaffolds off the building of the trust and just doing exactly and passionately what you say you're going to do to prove yourself to the other person before you go wild?
Yeah, I don't. What's that working? I don't think this is something. Well, let me speak for myself. This is not something I could have accepted, given away 10 years ago. I mean, not even close. The idea that there's so many things that I had to go through to get here. The idea of trying to do this from the outset of a relationship is, if somebody can do it, what a person that person must be to do that from the beginning. The only reason I feel comfortable enough to do it is because of the trust that I have built through watching her love me back. And we've had time, I mean, we've told people before, the limits that we had on the beginning of our non-monogamous journey were monstrous. There was barely anything we were comfortable with. And now it's, over time, not fallen away, but worked itself away. We've worked, we've talked through it, we've communicated those things away. We've taken baby steps. First of all, we were also the slowest swingers in the history of swinging. I mean, it was about 3 years of being non-monogamous before we actually did anything non-monogamous. So we took baby steps, but every time we tried one of those steps that we said we'd probably never try or that was super scary, it turned out fine. I mean, not every time we connected with somebody was perfect, but we didn't have any negative repercussions from it. And then we would try the next step, and then the next step. And just over time, that trust is built to the point where I no longer understand internally why I would need to put any limit on her, because I don't have any fear she's going to hurt me anyway. Does that answer the question?
I was just trying to understand, because you're saying, it sounds like you're saying the perfect representation of what you're talking about is no rules on that other person, but I'm trying to understand, is that never from the beginning, no rules? Because
No, I'm not saying that's not possible.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it. That would just be incredibly difficult, I would think, Catherine, but I don't know if you would think the same thing. But yeah, I mean, it feels scary even now that I think I have the foundation to put it into practice. It's still terrifying. And I know it's not going to be easy. There could be a day that she walks in the door, and I've given examples of the things, how extreme I'm talking. She comes in the door and says, "Hey, baby, I just fucked a guy on the pickleball courts or something." And then I'm going to go beat him in pickleball. I'm not saying that I'm to the point where if she were to walk in and say she did that I would go, "Good for you." I mean, I would probably be terrified and scared, and I don't know, hurt may not be the right word, but I'd go through all that stuff that we go through all the time. But I don't think I'm not scared anymore of that work. Is this going out? Okay, this is going out. I'm not scared of that work anymore. I know if that happens, if she meets somebody that she wants to do that with, I'll go through the work because I've given her the permission to do it, and I'll come out the other side stronger, just like every other step we've taken along the way. But I'm not saying this will be easy. I'm not suggesting it for anybody. I'm just saying that I do believe that if you wanted maximal life happiness, you need maximal freedom to do it. What else?
So, how do you categorize, might be the right word? Sometimes we need constraints in our relationship. Let me give you a good example of this for a story. Beth and I have a very overarching, that we're always honest and always open with each other. We don't hide things from each other. But in an academic sense, that is a constraint. So is that something different than the constraints you're talking about? Or is it just the ultimate level would be not even having that constraint? But then
Yeah, but that's a limit that you
That's
both,
a limit.
It's an agreement that you both have. So it's not really, it's an agreement that you both want, truly want. Is that something that you don't want and you're making her do?
Okay, so
as long as it's something you don't, it's like, that's not really a limit.
Okay,
Because
so you're talking about boundaries that are things that you both agree upon and fundamentally want together.
I'm talking about setting limits that prevent you from being who you truly want to be.
Okay.
So if you had a need to lie,
Yeah.
like if you just
Good.
couldn't.
No, that's I
Believe
know what
me.
you're saying, yeah.
Yes, plenty of people have all this in 4 bags of chips and still shit the nest because they still need to lie. Like being this open and honest is too scary for them.
Exactly.
They can't live without those lies. And so in that, if that person was in a relationship with you, then that would be an imposed limit on them because they have this need to lie. They are not interested in being themselves fully open.
And look, and that's another great example of something that's terrifying and shouldn't be. Honesty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrifying, right? I mean, even simple little things that probably most of us in this room are past at this point, which is saying, "Oh, honey, look at that girl over there. She's super hot." That would have pissed me off if my wife has told me that when I was 25, that she thought this other guy was smoking hot. So honesty is not something that you can embrace easily either, sometimes at first. But it's definitely worth it. I'm not saying this is an easy process. I'm just saying that I believe that the effort is worth the results. Yes.
I was going to share why I had a mini mental breakdown over here while I was listening to you, because I was having the inverse of how scary it is to be given that freedom, because that's what I've been doing this week, and I'm like, why is that scary? That should just all be like sunshine and roses. And I think there's so much conditioning, I'll just speak for myself, of that I can only be loved if it is conditional. And so for someone to say like, I really love you and I don't want to limit you, it's like, is this real? Could this be real? Am I worthy of that? And all the conditioning that goes against, it's like, am I worthy of that? Am I like, can I hold that? Can I be that person? Can the person that sees that in me and believes that in me, like, it's helping me stand up to be that person, but then there's that, like, oh God, am I really that good? I guess it's imposter syndrome at the end of the day. Right?
I mean, is it about worthiness or is it about being held? Like, if you look at child development,
Right.
if you give the kids boundaries, because if they have no boundaries, or if you've got wobbly boundaries, you say yes once and then no twice and then yes again. If you do that, it's like putting a kid into a playground and they spend all their time up against the fence going, can I push this fence down? Rather than just playing, like kids should. So if you hold them in a situation where they know the rules, or they know what the boundaries are, they're held, then they play, then they do the work of the kids. So if you look at this through an adult lens, how does that apply?
I think you're absolutely right, and I think so many of us, again, I'll speak for myself, I grew up with parents that weren't consistent because they hadn't done their own work. Right? And so I don't think they were trying to fuck with me. It was just, like they didn't have I always believe parents do the best they can with what they have, where they are, when they are. And at least that's what I'm telling myself about me as a parent. But I don't think that they could give that. And so it was often very conditional, and it was often very, I believed that approval and love were the same thing. I didn't understand until I was a parent that planet love and planet approval are two different planets, and one ecosystem, one weather system does not affect the weather system of the other. I don't think you can know that till you have children, but when I was a child, I thought if I didn't do what they wanted and intuit what they wanted, then I wouldn't be loved. And of course, anybody that heard my speech, if we don't believe that our caregivers love us, we believe we're going to die. So we do any and everything we can to hustle for approval, thinking that that's our only way to survive. And it's very difficult to, especially then with your attachment partner person and the person that, brings you down to your knees and all the bullshit goes away. We do very much feel like we did as children, right?
Yeah, it's even hard to be, sorry.
When Scott offered this theory to me, you can listen to the podcast, I said it's super cunty. Because I was taken aback, I wasn't expecting that, but also I'm a person that has always caged myself and set up guardrails and imposed my own boundaries, and it just felt safe. And I told him, I've often felt like a bird in a cage and the door's open and I'm so afraid to step out of it because I'm so used to this container and having these guardrails up. And so I was like, I don't want your gift. I'm perfectly happy like this because it's fucking scary to be given that freedom and what do I do with this? What does that mean? And so I still have to do the work to get where he is. And he's like, I'm not expecting reciprocity. I just want you to know this is where I'm at.
One of the things that I think is, I'm not sure this is to the point of what you guys were just talking about, but we're not even, some of us have made the move from monogamy to non-monogamy by not being honest with ourselves. We've built this move off the belief that this is just sex. I've said it, a lot of us have said it. I'm not going to catch feelings, it's not going to be emotional, and look, if you believe that, that's fine, but to me that is utterly nonsensical. It's like saying, I'm going to go and engage in the most emotionally charged thing a human being can do, and I'm going to keep emotions out of it. And I don't think it's possible unless you're some sort of cyborg. When I'm having sex with you, I'm trying to fall in love with you. If that makes my wife say, I'm not comfortable with you doing that anymore, and so be it. Because I don't know another way to do it. It sucks for me to try to just have sex. I don't enjoy it. It's like eating a burnt steak. It's ruining what should be something fantastic, in my opinion. But we've tried to comfort ourselves with that lie that, well, we're just having sex with people. That's all it is. It's never all it is. It can't be. I don't know how it could be. What else?
So much.
I'm just glad none of us or not none of us, but I was totally full bore crying, and then you're like, okay, bye guys, and I'm like, okay, I've had a second to get my shit together.
Yeah.
You don't have to
That
leave
was
yet.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. So when does the book come out? When does the book come out?
Okay, so we're back.
Think it went great. Again, I don't think it's as controversial as you may think, but again, I think pretty open to this concept anyways.
I do want to talk about some of the details, and I mentioned this in the speech, but the thing I want to bring up first, because it's the first type of response I tended to get when I was talking through this idea with a lot of our friends and people we respected. But what we're not saying is that you can't be in a happy relationship unless you've implemented this wild love theory, because we've only implemented it, and it's only one-sided, for about a month. And up until that point, for 9 years and 11 months, we've had tons of limits and boundaries and that sort of thing. And we've been wildly happy. So not saying you can't be happy, just trying to emphasize that this is my idea that will put you on a path towards maximal happiness. Well, another thing I wanted to discuss, because I'm not sure I did a great job of this in the speech, is this idea of imposed limits.
Boundaries?
Boundaries, yeah. So I use the word limit here because boundaries sometimes gets defined differently by different people. I don't know that limits is the best word, but essentially what we're talking about is when we get into a relationship, and April and I have done this many, many times, and we say a good example is, yes, we can potentially have sex with people. We're not monogamous anymore, so we can have sex outside of our primary relationship. But I don't want you having private messages with somebody. So that's an imposed limit and not something that you would impose on yourself if you were otherwise single, or it's not
But that is an imposed limit or boundary that I have on you.
Correct. Right.
Unless it's somebody of the same sex.
Right. Right. And so
you don't have that on me.
That's correct. Not anymore. I did, but not anymore. And so what we're not talking about are things that are mutually agreeable things like neither of us have an interest to going to a lot of operas. So if we have a limit that says we're not going to operas, that's because we both agree on it. It's not an imposed limit.
But this is something that can be applied to a monogamous marriage as well.
Correct.
Monogamous relationship where you both say we do not desire to have relations outside of our partnership. They both desire to be monogamous. So then saying you cannot have relations with somebody outside of our relationship would not be an imposed limit because that's something that you both desire, right?
Yes. Yeah, like all right. So it's different to say, I don't want to have any kind of relationship with anybody of the opposite sex other than my wife.
Right.
Right. If that's truly how you feel. And I think a lot of people do feel that way. Non-monogamy is not for everybody. But if you only feel that way because you think that's what your spouse wants and that's the only way to keep the peace, and so you want to keep the peace, so you want that limit, that's not the same kind of thing. You're only choosing that in order to appease your spouse. So we're talking about things that are imposed on you that you wouldn't otherwise have wanted.
Right.
And so that's the imposed boundaries in the theory. Yes, this is as extreme as it sounds in that I no longer have any limits on that I need to put in place on April in order to feel comfortable and safe. Not because I'm an awesome person, but because in 10 years, and I talked about this in the speech, but in 10 years of this non-monogamous relationship we've been in, you've just never violated my trust. I don't think you're going to be out there taking this wild love theory, this freedom, and going, all right, he's giving it to me. Now I'm going to fuck him up with it. You know, I don't
trust my intentions and my love. And right. I agree. And this isn't something also that you would have landed at 10 years ago. And you're not saying that in order to be optimally happy, you need to throw every limit and boundary out the window and just say, fuck it, wild love theory for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's the worst mistake you can make. And I addressed that a little bit in the speech, but this is something that takes a long, I think, at least for most people, maybe everybody, it's just something that takes a long time. You have to build that trust. I love the analogy that you talked about at the end of the Q&A session, where you brought up this idea of like the wild animal that's been caged and maybe its handlers were rehabbing it or whatever, and they decide to release it back into the wild. And, you know, you've seen videos like this on YouTube when they open the cage door and the animal's scared to leave the cage. It's grown so accustomed to those walls that it only feels safe inside of them. Its life has become small and it only feels comfortable in the small, and the big scares it. And
I don't know that saying boundaries make your world small, because we've lived for 10 years with a lot of boundaries, and I've never felt like we had small or limiting beliefs.
Well, maybe. And again, this goes back to I'm not saying you can't be happy.
Right.
I'm just thinking the more freedom you have, the happier, the more freedom to be your true, authentic self,
right,
the happier you can be. But like you've said, it is sometimes very difficult because we all have grown up either with self-imposed limits or limits put on us by our relationship partners or our families or whatever, that it's very difficult to embrace this idea of this wild freedom.
Like I govern my life with limits, self-imposed. Are you saying then also for me to be ultimately happy maximally happy, I would need to drop some of the self-imposed boundaries as well?
No, because my definition of imposed boundaries is from an external source. So in other words, a boundary or a limit that I put on you.
Right.
Not one that you put on you. Like if I say I am not going to allow myself to play more than 5 games of pickleball a week, and if I'm doing that because I think that's the best for my health, that's not an imposed, that's me doing what I truly actually want to do.
Right.
But if you tell me I can only play once a week, well, then that's an imposed limit that I may eventually grow to resent.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with
So I'm not talking about things you do for your own self.
never impose that.
No, you've never limited me in any way. My old age limits me from playing too much. Another thing I want to point out about this is it is a wonderful diagnostic tool.
Yeah.
So if you start to consider the ideas behind wild love theory and start to question what that would look like in your relationship, or how would you go about taking the steps to progressively work towards removing certain limits that you've imposed on your spouse, it's a scary thing. And what it's going to do is all of these thoughts will run through your head, because they did mine. And every one of those fears and thoughts, things that run through your head that scare you, are shining a spotlight where your relational weaknesses are, things that you can self-improve and work towards making yourself better in order to be able to remove the limits that you feel like you need to feel protected.
I think the lifestyle in general, or any non-monogamous relationship, different than what society expects you to do, you have to look at those parts of your life, because you're going to experience jealousy. And in order to have a successful relationship in non-monogamy, you have to be challenging those and shining lights in those dark places.
Absolutely. I think most of us, if you're already in some sort of consensually non-monogamous relationship, you've already went through that process with at least one limit, and that's removing the limit of not being able to have sex with anybody but your spouse.
Right.
And then that's not an easy process, or at least for most people, that's not been easy. And so this is not an easy process either. And it's not something that I think should be tried at the outset of a relationship.
Right.
Trying to go from a relationship full of limits today to a relationship with no limits tomorrow is probably going to be a horrible disaster.
Though we have met people, it took us 3 years to even play with. So we've met people that said, okay, we're going to open up our marriage, and just dove head first into the deep end and have been wildly successful.
Yeah. I think some people are better at this kind of mental gymnastics than others. And some of us have more relational trauma. I've had 3 failed marriages, and I'm not proud of that. I don't like to admit it, but they were marriages full of fighting and bickering and breaches of trust. It's taken me 10 years, taken me a decade to unwork all of that trauma, even though you've never given me a reason not to trust you.
Right.
It's just taken that long.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting thought. Typically we say, and we've said it in podcast episodes, that there's no evolution in the lifestyle. In other words, where you're at is right where you should be, and where you were was not worse, and where you're going is not better.
Right.
Right. It's just, whatever is. However, there is at least an argument that can be made that if this wild love theory is correct, that if removing limits from a relationship in the right way can give your life maximal happiness, then it's possible there's actually a moral imperative to try. If you think trying to give your partner maximal happiness is something that you ought to do, that's an ethical ought. An argument can be made that you owe it to them to work towards that. But an argument could be made that in order to let my partner have maximal happiness through no limits, I would have to become very unhappy.
Right.
And in that sense, I don't think you owe it to your partner.
Right.
I'm not saying do this even if it makes you unhappy. I'm saying do the work to get to where you can gleefully give this to your partner.
Well, that would just be like we've talked about, like separate dating and stuff like that. If your partner wants to separate date and you allow them to do that because you want them to be happy at the expense of your being miserable and happy and your sanity, then that's something that you can shelf, and maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years. We expand sometimes without even realizing it, just by being together and communicating. And we've said that with separate dating. We got to a point where finally we were like, this doesn't feel as uncomfortable having these conversations. We're not feeling those twinges and those weird feelings anymore just because we shelved the idea and had a lot of communication about it. And then when we went back to readdress it a year later, we were like, this doesn't feel as painful. And that's kind of the process I think that you got to with Wild Love Theory, where you were like, well, this feels really uncomfortable for me to see April do this or hear about it, and then because our relationship is so open and communicative, you finally got to a place where it was like, this doesn't feel so scary now.
I think that's a perfect analogy in microcosm. Literally, if I would think about you going out on a separate day, I would start to have all of these fears and insecurities that pop up to the point where I wrote them all down and we listed them in the podcast.
Yeah.
You know, it was something I don't think I was quite ready for when we initially agreed to try it. Sure. And then whatever you said, it was like a year or something later, we actually talked about it, and we've been on one, you've been on kind of another one, and it's just not nearly the animal that it was. But that was a process, and maybe that particular thing was roughly a year-long process. Some things may be longer, shorter, but again, I think that we've reached the point we haven't been doing separate dating. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but I think we're at a point where we're both have done enough work to where if we tried to do it, I bet it would be a positive.
Right.
Whereas 3 years ago, it could have been the end of the relationship.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Maybe not that bad, but this is another point that may seem controversial. I think a lot of us are drawn to the idea of non-monogamy initially because of the sex. However, I think a lot of us that stay in it for a long time do it for reasons that aren't necessarily about the sex. Not that the sex becomes unimportant, but other reasons start to rear their head that you find great benefit to and that may be deeper and more impactful and keep you in the lifestyle longer.
Like the connections?
Like connections. Right. You know, simple things that we don't think much of anymore as far as a negative, like having a friend that's of the opposite sex.
Right.
That doesn't bother me at all to think about you having a male friend, and I don't think it bothers you to think about me having a female friend. But that's a big problem in some monogamous relationships. A lot of the things that we think we're in non-monogamy for may be disguised as just relationship things. In other words, Wild Love Theory allows you, if you've implemented it fully, to explore and connect with other people in whatever way you want and feels appropriate to that person and you. You can't do that in a monogamous relationship. There's all sort of baked in rules. You know, you can't have sex with them. You can't kiss them. You can't be romantic. That's something that
both monogamous partners want.
Correct. Yeah. I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad. That may be and often is the right choice for couples. Wild Love Theory just takes this idea of connection, extrapolates it to the extreme, and I think shines a light on the fact that the allure of non-monogamy, at least in the long run, may not be as much about sex as it is about relationships in general. I don't think non-monogamy is any more about sex than monogamy is. Doesn't mean it doesn't have a part in it. It's an important part of both relationship models, but I think the longevity of each of those models is dependent more heavily on other things than the sex. Yeah. And Wild Love Theory just allows you to extrapolate that deeper, loving connection with everyone or anyone you choose instead of just one person. You still I feel shackled, not anymore really, but feel shackled in the way, you know, growing up, I could relate to people unless I had a document saying I was married to them.
Right. Yeah. Well, especially in the church. But you're saying though that Wild Love Theory can apply to any relationship structure. So if a couple was choosing to be monogamous, are you saying that they should also be allowed to have other non-sexual connections?
No, I'm not saying there's a should there. I'm saying that if, let's say you and I, we wanted to be monogamous, but for whatever reason, we enjoyed well, you see examples of this, what I was getting at. People that go to lifestyle resorts but never play with anybody. Right. They like the environment. They like the flirty banter, the deeper connections, the getting past the small talk and having real conversations. If you wanted a monogamous relationship, but you wanted those other features, and both of you genuinely wanted monogamy.
Yeah.
Like there was no allure to either of you for non-monogamy, but you like this other stuff. Sure, Wild Love Theory still applies because in that case, if that were us, I'm not imposing monogamy on you.
Right.
You actually want it.
Right.
And you're not just doing it to appease me. And you're not imposing monogamy on me. You know, there's other limits and there's other things that you can remove. So that's why I think wild love theory can apply to any relationship structure as long as you're not imposing a boundary or a limit.
Okay. That makes sense.
I also think that the primary message of wild love theory sounds eerily similar to the primary message of the world's major religions.
It's just actually loving people.
It's just love everybody. I mean,
The difference is the world's major religions have so many imposed boundaries and rules about who you can't love.
Right.
That you can love, you should love everyone except or unless.
Wild love theory just takes the idea of love everybody and puts it into real practice with no limit. Whereas religion says love everybody, but do it the way we tell you to.
Yeah. Love the sinner, hate the sin.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of shit.
Other dumb things we heard growing up. You know, that may be a bit of an overreach to say it's like religion, but it really does. Look, and I talk about it in the speech. I think we would not have all of these. I mean, my Facebook feed right now is just full of hateful political.
Used to delete and unfollow those people.
But we just had the inauguration of a new president. And so
By the way, if you post shitty shit on your Facebook, I immediately unfriend and unfollow you.
I don't. I subscribe to you just for the entertainment value. But yeah, so when people argue right now about, I hate Trump, I love Trump, you know, this is great for America, this is awful for America.
So hateful to other people about it.
Yeah, but if instead of trying to win a fight with that person, you were just trying to figure out how to love them.
Oh, yeah.
The tone, the tenor of that conversation would change dramatically. And I mean what I say in that speech, that I don't think there's any problem in the world that couldn't be solved if everybody was genuinely trying to love everybody else.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And also, I will say you are a good person to be representing this, because even though you have all those assholes on your Facebook, you are very kind with them in responses when they post stuff on your social media. I am not. And that's why I just have to unfollow and delete, because I'm not going to be kind and loving.
Well,
I haven't arrived yet.
Well, another thing too that, you know, this is something I just thought of when you mentioned that, is we have this incredible relationship. We've told a lot of people that we've only ever had really one big fight. And I used to fight incessantly with my other 3 marriages.
Yeah.
I didn't become a better person. I'm just found the person that I should be with. I found a person that matches with me. I was not a good husband to my ex-wives. I don't think they were good wives to me, but we certainly would all agree that we weren't good matches for each other. And so I've been in these relationships where I felt very constrained, because I would try to push the limits and do what I wanted to do, even though sometimes I knew it was going to aggravate them, make them angry, because it wasn't what they wanted me to do. And I've never felt that way with you. Even though you haven't removed all the limits off of me, you've removed so many that it almost feels like I'm already practicing wild love theory anyway. And I'm so happy, because I know what it was like to be in a relationship where our wants and desires didn't match up.
Right. And you're right. Just because you don't have the same wants and desires, and, you know, we've seen couples who fight constantly. And I think that's really the bottom line, is maybe their wants and desires aren't aligning. And that doesn't mean that either one of them are not good people. They're just not a fit for each other.
Yeah. Well, that brings up another point. It not only is this shines a spotlight on all your relational weaknesses when you start trying to think about giving this sort of freedom to your partner, but it also should act as a fantastic filter for helping you pick a mate.
Yes. I agree.
Because if you're going into, you know, we've all been raised to believe relationships are about compromise.
And have to last forever, which I am not a big proponent of marriage. I'm not a fan. I don't think some people are meant to spend their life with one person,
right,
for the rest of as their primary partner.
Yeah, I hope you're planning on staying with me, but I think I take your point.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about this before. I think people think marriage should be hard. Marriage to the right person should not be hard.
Right.
Your life should feel easy. Your love should feel easy. Forgiving each other should feel easy. I mean, not that it's not a process and you work through it in a lot of communication, but if you're screaming and arguing constantly, you may not be a fit for each other. And that doesn't mean either one of you are bad. It maybe means you both independently have some real work to do, some therapy to do, and maybe this isn't the time to be together.
Yeah, I mean, you could hear in the Q&A of the speech, it was Evie, one of our presenters, was talking about where sometimes kids need these defined boundaries in order to know how to safely play, right? She doesn't mean play by sex. She means literal child's play. And I think that's true even for our relationships. We need maybe some starting boundaries, some starting limits.
Limits, healthy boundaries.
With the goal being, I only need these right now because I haven't known you long enough to trust that you're going to protect me in the way I want to be protected.
Right.
Those things are kind of this protective fence around the playground at first. But over time, that fence can start to feel like a cage, and you can resent the cage. And even worse, if you spend too long in the cage, you're scared to leave it.
Right. I agree.
So I do think the boundaries and limits at the start of a relationship are probably necessary most of the time. But the goal, if you believe anything we're saying about wild love theory, is to work towards removing them. And the further point of talking about not getting into a bad relationship is if you've got a list of 155,000 compromises you've got to make in order to be happy with this person, it's probably not the person.
Probably not.
Because that's just going to be too difficult. Find somebody who requires the least amount of the removal of your autonomy in order for them to feel happy.
Right. And actually what you're saying is don't go into a relationship looking to change someone.
Yeah. Yes. Amen. Because it's probably not going to work, or at least they're not going to be happy.
No. And I think that's one of the reasons that we work so beautifully together is I don't ask you to change anything except for shaving in another bathroom. But I'm not asking you to change who you are as a person.
No.
And you're not asking me, you have never asked me to change who I am as a person.
No, and I know I have some obvious weaknesses, but you've never come to me and said, look, I just cannot deal with this forgetfulness of yours.
Right.
You went to the grocery store for the 4th time this week and forgot your wallet every time, and I had to get out of bed from my nap to bring you your wallet. You never address those situations like that.
No,
you
but I think it's kind of funny.
You just show up at the door with my wallet when I pull up, videoing me to make fun of me. And I love that.
That might be part of my personality though, because it's just like when I was raising kids, I laughed at all the bad shit that they did because I thought it was kind of funny and a little bit endearing. And I think the same with you.
Well, so final note I have here about this is, and I mentioned something like this in the speech too. The reason I think this is so beautiful, and I do actually think I want to try to write a book. I don't have the skill to do it, but I'm going to try it.
You should.
Because there's a lot of things that can be unpacked about this. Maybe some steps to progress down the road of wild love theory and things that will impact in your life and some real positives, but some things to watch out for as well. But I think it's a worthwhile goal to pursue removing the limits off your partner in a smart and safe way. Because just imagine loving and trusting someone so much that you can give them this freedom and know, not just have faith, but know that they will cherish and use it instead of weaponizing and abusing it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And that rhymed.
I think that's well said. So you can write stuff.
Oh, I'm going to write a poem. It's not going to be a book. It's going to just be a long poem.
So learned.
All right. Well, again, we appreciate you guys listening to this, and we know that, or we think this is probably not something that everybody will agree with. Some of you might, but please give us your feedback. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment. If you're listening to it on podcasts, I don't know, can you comment on a podcast?
No, but you can send us an email at naughtygymonline@gmail.com. You can message us, DM us on any social medias, Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever the fuck it's called. We're on Blue Sky. We're on TikTok.
I have no idea what Blue Sky is. Also, really, seriously, if you get any value out of our podcast ever and would like to help us, please leave us a review on either Apple or Spotify on the podcast platforms, because it does truly help us get this podcast out to more people, because the algorithm picks it up and puts it in people's feeds and stuff. So please take a minute or two to go and leave us a review.
And if you want to be part of an inclusive, sex-positive community who is also health and fitness minded, get your workouts 5 days a week.
Six days a week.
6 days a week. I said I was not a mathlete. And some nutrition guidance, access to our 4 sexy Naughty Gym coaches, and myself included. You like that? Shameless.
Yeah.
then go to www.naughtygym.com and subscribe. It's $20 a month, and you get everything you need to stay healthy and get fit, whatever that looks like for you, sexually, physically, mentally. We provide it all, and be part of our live discussions.
Yeah. In fact, we're going to have a live discussion on our private platform tonight, just the men. So, we have men's discussions, women's, and multi-gender discussions.
Well, the men is anyone who identifies as a man, whoever identifies as a woman. And we have a lot of good things coming up. So you can go to our website, join the email list. We send out bi-monthly newsletters and all of our trips, info, how to travel with us. We'll be in Dallas. What month is it? February 8th for Libertine events, Fire and Ice in Houston. And then we've got a lot of travel. Some of it's personal, some of it's business. And then we'll be at Keynote March 8th through the 15th, and also March 29th through April 5th for Casual Swinger Week.
And we know there's still some rooms available for Casual Swinger Week. And if you know Mickey and Mallory, that's to love them.
They put on...
It's an incredible party. Yeah.
Book your room, come play with us, and remember to never stop playing.